right, welcome back.
Yeah, Ricky can't take away for the intro for this one. Welcome back, everyone, to another Not So Mid-Major, I guess, podcast, vlog. I don't know what we're going to be calling these kinds of series. I was calling it Not So Mid-Major Report, but that kind of died out when we just decided to pick like random topics. So I don't know what you want to call these, what to call this series. But
not so mid-major adventure.
It's us talking is pretty much what is going on right now. So, hello, Rick. I'm Chris. Please follow us on Twitter as well. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We will be doing a giveaway once we hit 50 subscribers here on YouTube. But just to get it out of the way, the changes in the top 25 that happened this last week. Hello to number 22, Florida. Number 24, Purdue. And the first time we're seeing them in the top 25, Drake. The other undefeated team in college basketball. We will be getting to the other two as you can tell from the title of this video, but Drake number 25.
I can't remember the words to Hotline Bling.
My
brain just went out.
Yeah, I know you need to get the old meme going of the dance. But yes, hello to you guys three. But goodbye to Minnesota, Louisville, and another mid-major team, St. Louis as well, got bumped out of the rankings, but they are getting votes right now. The only ranked team that stayed ranked was number 1 Gonzaga, and then also Drake is ranked as well, getting votes. A whole bunch of teams, much like last week. Loyola Chicago, Boise State, St. Bonaventure, Belmont, St. Louis, as I mentioned before, Toledo, and San Diego State. A whole bunch of teams that are getting votes right now. And then on to what we are talking about this week. Who should be number 1? These two teams have been 1 and 2 the entire season. And in every other year, just match this team up against that team any other year. Yes, for sure should be number 1. In comparison. But we're going to be discussing this year, as of right now, what their resume is. At the moment, we're not going to be talking about what's coming up in the rest of the schedule, but at the moment, right now, who should be number 1, Gonzaga or Baylor? As you can tell behind us and on my hat and Rick's shirt, or sweatshirt, sorry, yes, we are going to be biased. That's why I micromanaged a lot of little details within the two teams to at least try to make this as fair as possible.
Yeah.
And we will try to discuss, and again, we are going to try to be fair with every little detail that we could think of are as important stats between the two teams. Who does it favor? Who does it give the advantage towards?
Yeah. So we can roll that. So basically, we're looking at a paper tiger. This with the biggest stat we don't have. It happens. The biggest stat that we don't have recorded is coaching ability, the intangibles. And both coaching staffs are phenomenal. Every Gonzaga fan out there knows about Fiery Michelson halftime speeches. Mark Few's ability to adjust in game. The fact that he gets his annual technical foul.
He has yet to get one this year. I just
realized. No, he got one.
Oh, did he? When did he get it?
It was like game 1 or 2, and he got it like a minute into the game.
Oh, yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah, and so, but he always, he knows exactly what to do to fire up the guys, to the point where people are making Lin-Manuel Miranda mashups about him. And so, but at the same time, I think it's Brad Stevens at Baylor right now.
I think so. I forget.
He's doing a great job. He even brought in some Gonzaga pedigree to make his coaching staff better.
And honestly, there's a reason why we're comparing these two together, and why I feel like a lot of people are having a hard time deciding who is number 1.
They both
overall. It's either, honestly, between these two teams, you can see by the votings, it's either you get the number 1 vote or you get the number 2 vote.
Yep.
You don't get a number 3 vote or anything lower than that. So there's a reason why these two teams are number 1 and number 2, and will be a number 1 seed coming into March.
They both have multiple players on preseason or on midseason watch lists. They both are significantly above the rest of the field in terms of efficiency margins. They are both top 8 all-time efficiency margins. 2013 Florida, I believe, is the highest.
Yes. Yeah, I remember seeing that post. Yeah, I kind of made a comment about it that I felt like some people weren't really happy about, because there was, if you look back, kind of what we were talking about, if you look back in the history of efficiency margins on Ken Palm, between the last, 6 years actually, last 6 years, the last teams have been like champions, Final Four team, a round of 32 team, and a round of,
and then there's an
Elite Eight and Sweet 16 team. And basically all we need for bingo is a runner-up and a round of 64. Those are minus Baylor and Gonzaga this year, the last 4 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the last 4 years, the highest teams in efficiency margins have somehow managed to not overlap in where they got eliminated in March. But I kind of made a joke that, kind of Baylor and Gonzaga need to like figure out who's going to lose in the 64 and who's going to be the runner-up to the championship, so we can get bingo in that.
Well, if one of them doesn't make a 1 seed, then it'll be that team, because we don't have another Virginia here.
True,
so,
we don't.
But really what it comes down to is, I think that this game does come down to coaching.
Honestly.
There have been some jokes that I don't think should be jokes. I think there should be more real, that we're skip the NCAA tournament, we're just doing a 7-game NBA Finals series style.
Between Gonzaga and Baylor, yes.
And I think we end up 5-2 or 4-3.
Yeah, it's going to be close, but it's just like, it's just going to whoever gets lucky in some games, to be honest, pretty much. But I do agree. Like, obviously you can't micromanage stats on coaches. That's hard. So let's at least get into the stats that we currently have between Gonzaga and Baylor. Again, we're not going to talk about what's coming up in their schedules, because yes, I will agree that does kind of factor in. But again, Baylor could lose those games. Gonzaga could lose those games. We don't know what's going to happen in the future until it comes. So let's see what it is right now. Records, basically identical. Gonzaga 17-0, Baylor 16-0. Road wins for Gonzaga, 4 road wins, Baylor 5 road wins. Neutral zone stadiums, 5 for Gonzaga, 3 for Baylor, and then home wins both at 8. I personally think overall this kind of gives the advantage to Baylor if it wasn't this year.
So
if it wasn't this year without fans, I would say the road stuff.
Your hockey voice came out there though.
For what?
Neutral zones? Or is that
neutral stadiums?
Yeah,
neutral stadiums, whatever. Like
no.
There's
It's fun. Because you're right. Like,
I think any other year, if it wasn't this year, I would
with
say
that
that record, even with Gonzaga having an extra win,
the extra road win for Baylor.
Those road wins, especially any other year. Like I said, any other year. This year, these records are identical. Let's just be honest.
You might as well say 17-0 neutral site.
Yes, because that's what everything has been. The quad wins overall between Gonzaga and Baylor are essentially identical. Quad 1 both at 5, quad 2 both at 2, quad 3 at 4, and then Gonzaga has quad 4 6 wins in that category, and then Baylor has 5 in quad 4. So identical.
So one thing to note here, I don't know where St. Mary's has gone up and down, but when I was harassing some of my coworkers, I noticed that St. Mary's clocked in at 76 on Ken Palm, which means they are 1 spot away from being a quadrant 1
for the away game.
Game. So that, depending on which side that landed on, that's a fun piece for me.
And again, this kind of gets into the same exact thing as kind of I mentioned before with the record. It's still I mean, even though it's exactly lined up between top to bottom, again, I think this is still neutral in
Yeah.
my stance between.
This is literally as wash as you
Yeah.
can get.
So now let's micromanage their stats on the season.
Mm-hmm.
Field goal percentage and points. Gonzaga both first in NCAA for these two stats. 55.3% shooting with 94.3 points a game. And then Baylor still a very impressive 50.3% field goal shooting, which is 14th overall last I checked. And then 87.2 points a game, which is 6th overall.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a little bit of advantage to Gonzaga, but man, those are impressive from Baylor.
I think it's safe to say both offenses can shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And then on the defensive end, defensive field goal percentage, so their opponents. Gonzaga's opponents are shooting at 41.1% and scoring on average 70.4 points a game, whereas Baylor is a little bit below that in terms of percentage, 40.7% and then 62.4 points per game.
And the thing that I haven't watched much Baylor, but the thing that stands out to me about that Gonzaga stat is it feels higher than it should be, but that's because so often Gonzaga's bench is playing 10 plus minutes in the game.
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely a factor going in. I don't know what Baylor's situation is like in terms of the bench, but it does also feel like a deep team as well. From what I was kind of looking at a little bit of their stats, they did feel like they had quite a bit of players.
Spread.
Yeah, it felt like 1 minutes were spread, and two, there were some bench guys coming in. Like I felt like there was a bunch of guys. Just if you saw like how many games they've played on the season.
Okay.
So, but again, they're both deep teams.
And those stat lines on the defensive side, they both play stingy defense, giving up about 2 out of 5 shots.
Yeah. And then assists per game, 20.1 for Gonzaga, which is 2nd overall in NCAA, 18.5 for Baylor, which is 6th overall in NCAA.
Sharing the ball gives you a high quality shot, which is more likely to score.
So
assists are good.
So not only do they score a lot of points, they also pass the ball really well. So they're able to maneuver a lot on offense. Turnovers, 11.9 turnovers per game for Gonzaga, 12.4 turnovers game for Baylor. So really just an extra possession and a half if you're facing Baylor.
Yeah.
Essentially is what it is. So the assist to turnover ratio, Gonzaga 1.69 assists for every turnover, which is 4th highest in NCAA, and then Baylor 1.49 assists for every turnover, 14th overall in NCAA. So offensively, it's solid.
When you pass the ball to the open man, you score. There is statistical
Pretty
correlation.
So I guess overall, what do these stats right now favor? I guess, do they actually favor? Because I mean, yes, Gonzaga is
51-49, 51.
That's pretty much
51
what it
Gonzaga,
is.
49 Baylor.
That's pretty much what it is right now. Is that it's by like a fraction of a percent? I feel like overall.
This would be like who. Did you hit the halftime buzzer beater or not?
Yes.
That decides if you win.
Yes. Turnovers forced on the defensive end. So not only turnovers forced, but points off turnovers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Gonzaga 15.29 turnovers forced per game, averaging about 20.6 points off those turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
Baylor, on the other hand, 18.56 turnovers they forced per game, 23.6 points. The ratio, I feel like, favors Gonzaga, but Baylor's gonna get more turnovers.
I like Baylor better in this. It shows when we were talking about that needle being slightly towards Gonzaga, getting those extra 2 or 3 turnovers, getting those extra 3 points could make up for that.
Yes, and that will factor into that score difference overall, especially since these are two teams that I will get to in a little bit that are very, or at least Gonzaga is a very fast-paced team.
Yeah.
Baylor can play fast if they want to play fast.
But they play a stingy, tough defense.
That's the thing, is that I think Baylor has an overall advantage on defense.
Yeah.
And then that offense is just kind of back and forth between the two teams. 3-point field goal percentage plus like averages per game. Gonzaga 35.4% per game from the three, making about 7 and taking about 20 to 21 shots a game from the 3-point line. Baylor, on the other hand, 43.4%, making over 10, almost to 11, and taking about 24, 25 shots a game from the 3-point line. 3-point shots favor Baylor.
Especially because Gonzaga, historically and currently, doesn't do well at defending the three. Hashtag Wichita State.
Right. No, right. Because
22 points in 7 possessions or some crap like that.
No, it was, I think I looked back on it a little bit because I think I have something coming up. But yeah, that game was hard.
It was,
from the
yeah,
3-point
it
line.
was, well, there was just a 7 possessions, or 8 possession stretch where they scored 22 points, and it was disgusting.
Yeah.
But looking at this, the
next stat that I have too.
Well, no, what I'm looking at is Gonzaga's numbers. That seems lower than what I expected.
For averages. Even like from previous years, you expect them to make, not make 10 a game, but it feels like most seasons have been like 8.9, 9.2 range.
Well, yeah, and so I'm wondering, because let's be real, 3 of those 7 makes are Corey Kispert.
Yeah.
And so I always feel like there's more than 4 other threes going in, but I guess there's not. So
there's been games where it's been a little bit slow too, but kind of what you were alluding to, especially on the defensive end. So defensive stats this season, Gonzaga pretty much is matching their offense with their defensive stats. On the defensive end, their opponents are scoring 34.4% from the 3-point line, making the exact same number, pretty much 7 3-pointers a game, and taking about a shot more as well for attempts. Baylor having the advantage, very drastic advantage for the 3-point defense. Their opponents are scoring 30.8%, scoring about 5 close to 6 3-pointers a game, and taking less than 20 shots from the 3-point line, 18.9. So I think overall 3-point advantage. Yeah.
Massive advantage from the perimeter.
On both ends of the court.
On both ends of the court for Baylor. Now that doesn't mean their perimeter players are better, because we haven't gotten to 2-point scoring yet.
I mean, we kind of got into the field goal, but yeah, I see what you're saying. But then yeah, like overall, again, it's still pick a stat. It favors one team slightly. I think this is the one stat, kind of with the turnovers as well. But the 3-point stat is definitely, it's Baylor's advantage overall.
Yeah. What that comes down to is, can Drew Timme stay out of foul trouble so that the guards can stay home on the perimeter?
Right. Overall. So then, I guess, again, we're still going to micromanage a lot of these stats going forward a little bit. I'm sure you can see some stats where it's just like, why are we going to talk about that? We have to talk about it because it's these two teams. Steals per game, 8.5 for Gonzaga, 31st overall in NCAA, 9.7 4th overall for Baylor.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to talk about how many fouls a game each team has, because it's going to come down to this. It's going to come down to who has fewest fouls. And free throws, essentially, between these two.
All I can think about when I see 17.2 fouls for Gonzaga is how 5 of them came against Suggs in 4 minutes of playing time. It was like watching Zach Collins in the championship game all over again.
Right, yeah, so 17.2 fouls a game for Gonzaga. Baylor 16.75. And then free throw percentage plus the attempts that they're going to have per game. Gonzaga 72.8% from the free throw line. They're going to get to the line about 22, 23 times a game so far that we've seen. Baylor, on the other hand, slightly less, but also slightly more attempts. 70% from the free throw line, and then 24.6 attempts per game. Which doesn't, I didn't quite do the math. Does it come out to about the same? You don't tie. 0.72.
0.7 times
Yes,
24.6
Yeah.
times, or no, then divided by,
No, you already
No.
did. So it's 17 points that they're going to have right there.
yeah.
So that's 17 points for Baylor, and then points.
Oh, and then I have to, okay,
do
whatever,
points.
17.2.
Yes.
And then,
728
0.728 times
22.7. So
16.5.
So it's about a point more for Baylor.
yeah.
Is essentially what that comes down to. Which literally it might come down to just a single point between these two teams. That's the thing.
It should, with the way that they are
Yeah.
playing and the fact that their efficiency metrics are what they are.
Mhm.
It should come down to final possession, 1 point here, 1 point there.
Yeah. And then I guess we're going to talk about, I just included this stat because I kind of see a little bit of an advantage for Baylor on this too. Total rebounds per game, which obviously depends on your opponent's shooting as well. Gonzaga 39.5 rebounds per game, 10.6 offensive rebounds. Baylor 38.2 rebounds a game, 13.1 offensive rebounds. So that's about an extra 2.5 possessions.
I see that, and
That's-
on paper, that's true.
Yeah.
However, my gut tells me in this game, the rebounding advantage is drastically in favor of the Zags.
It's going to be on the defensive end more than the offensive end, just for how well both
Because
shoot.
teams don't miss. Like,
I can't imagine there being 10 opportunities for Gonzaga or Baylor in this kind of a matchup for an offensive rebound.
well, and you also got to look at the rebounding out of Gonzaga with Ajayi, Watson, and Time. Like,
Mhm.
they gobble up rebounds. I don't know if Baylor has been playing teams that have guards that rebound that way.
Right. Yeah, especially for how well they do from outside running in.
Yeah.
And then final stat that I will have between the two teams. Both teams have 4 guys with 10 plus points. Gonzaga is the only team with one player, Corey Kispert, with over 20 points, 20.2 points.
Yeah.
Ken Palm overall with their stats. Adjusted offense, adjusted defense, adjusted tempo. Baylor adjusted offense is 3rd overall, adjusted defense is 3rd overall, adjusted tempo is 153rd overall. Gonzaga, on the other hand, adjusted offense is 1 overall, adjusted defense, kind of what we were already expecting anyways, 11th overall, and then adjusted tempo 8. 8th fastest in NCAA, according to Ken Palm stats. Baylor can play a fast game if they need to play a fast game.
They're set right in the middle, but like 153 is a very, very middle of the pack
Yeah.
tempo. But what that does mean is that they can slow it down for a slow team, and they can speed it up.
That's where I can see an advantage for Baylor if they can control the game, because Gonzaga this season and historically, and especially this season, we've seen in the last week or two, adjusting to that slow pace, especially in the first 5 to 7 minutes, it's been a struggle.
Yeah.
It's been a struggle in those first 5-7 minutes for a slow game. If they can't get a control there. And I think that's what the team overall needs to do. Granted, yes, they can do a full court press
Yeah.
to try to speed it up,
But not with Baylor's guards.
and that's gonna be the biggest issue. I think there's a lot of things that do favor Baylor in all this, and I do think that there's some stats that do favor Gonzaga overall.
Yeah.
So now, those are the stats overall. Now let's talk about the 2 games and then what will be a 3rd, 4th game because Baylor has to play them twice. The head-to-head matchups. They have played similar teams, both very quality teams.
Yeah.
First game for Gonzaga, Well, actually, I'm actually doing this opposite. So more of the lower ranked team. Auburn. This was Gonzaga's second game of the season.
Which also means we have to throw out there that huge asterisk on this
And
comparison.
that's what I'll say. Like these two games happened for Gonzaga, the first two games of the season. Baylor later on, it was into this new year.
Well, and Auburn's 5-star freshman was not available against
That's
Gonzaga.
true. But yeah, Auburn. We're gonna compare Gonzaga's stats and Baylor's stats to when they played Auburn. Again, different times, different players were on the court. A whole bunch of differences that we will omit. The score for Gonzaga 90-67, Baylor 84-72. Field goal percentage: Gonzaga 52.9%, Baylor 43.1%. Baylor had more guys in double-digit points. Gonzaga only had 3 guys. Baylor had 5. 3 points. Gonzaga percentage 28.6%, 6 for 21. Baylor 36.7%, 11 for 30.
Yeah.
Assists, Gonzaga 19, Baylor 17. Offensive rebounds, Gonzaga 13, Baylor 17. Turnovers, Gonzaga 14, Baylor 9.
Yep.
Field goal defense, so Auburn's stats in these from here on out. Auburn had 37.3% against Gonzaga from the field, 41.2% from the field from Baylor. 3-point stats, Auburn scoring 11 for 35 from the 3-point against Baylor 6 for 25. Assist on defense, so Auburn getting 12 assists off Gonzaga versus 17 on Baylor. Forced turnovers, so Gonzaga was able to force 17 turnovers, Baylor was able to force 13 turnovers. Auburn's offensive rebounds, 9 against Gonzaga, 17 versus Baylor.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like, okay, you have this one stat, but we have this other stat. And it's,
Yeah.
which one do you pick is the most important out of all these stats?
And you can definitely see that there was a different style of game played in both of those, with Auburn leaning heavily on the 3-point shot against Gonzaga, but then Baylor leaning heavier on the 3-point shot against Auburn. And so what stands out to me is that Gonzaga made 5 threes less than Baylor but on 9 fewer shots. And then so they would need to shoot about 50% to catch up.
Yeah.
And then the exact same stat down here with the Auburn's threes, 11 for 35 versus 6 for 25. That's 5 for 10. So again, 50%, which is not an unreasonable number. And so that to me tells me more about like style and pace of the game and what the game plan was. But in terms of looking for an advantage or a disadvantage, I do not see one.
I will probably pick a slight advantage for Baylor out of all these stats, more because of the timing of this game. For Baylor, because of the 5 guys with 10 plus points, I feel like that favors Baylor slightly.
Okay.
Now the question is, does Gonzaga get 5 guys with 10 plus points?
Now, probably much more likely. Anton Watson has learned how to score, and
we have Nemhard getting really comfortable with,
because
because that was his second game in like 2 weeks worth of like, oh wait, I'm actually playing with the team this year.
Yeah, and it was and he hadn't played a game in like a year or something because he sat out a season at Florida, or something like that. And so it was a big deal for that. However, I agree there is an advantage to Baylor because they played a better Auburn team.
Right, for all that. So then again, with the fairness of this stat too that we're going to be talking about, the game versus Kansas. Again, 2 different times. This was the first ever game for both teams for Gonzaga and Kansas versus when Baylor and Kansas played. It was on January 18th. So again, there is a timing scenario. This was during a time when Kansas and Gonzaga and quite literally everyone in NCAA was trying to figure out what the system they were going to play for this year and what the players were going to be like this year. But again, we're just gonna throw out the numbers and take that into consideration. But pretty much what I see is more or less a reversal for some of these things. Comparison to Auburn for some of the stats. So Kansas' score for Gonzaga 102-90 versus Baylor 77-69. Gonzaga 5 guys scoring 10 plus points. Baylor 3 guys. Field goal percentage. Gonzaga scoring an ungodly 64.5% from the field. I think the only time I've ever seen that was against Duke in the Maui Invitational Tournament. And then Baylor scoring, I would say, also slightly an ungodly 53.8% from the field too.
If you are shooting 53.8, you are doing great.
And then 3-point percentage, or 3-point stats. Again, a little bit of a favor in Baylor, but not like what we saw when we were talking about Auburn. 6 for 18 for Gonzaga, 9 for 19 for Baylor. Assists, Gonzaga 16, Baylor 14. Offensive rebounds, Gonzaga 6, Baylor 10. Turnovers in the game, Gonzaga 15, Baylor 18. And then on defensive end, so Kansas was scoring 53.2% against Gonzaga versus 48.1% from Baylor. 3-point defense, Kansas scored 8 for 18 against Gonzaga, 10 for 19 versus Baylor. Kansas got 10 assists against Gonzaga, 18 assists from Baylor. Gonzaga forced 15 turnovers on Kansas, as well as Baylor's forcing 15 assists on Kansas. And then offensive rebounds, Kansas only got 5 versus, still only 9 versus Baylor. I think that there's quite a bit of stats that favor Gonzaga in this, especially with the field goal percentage.
Yeah.
Even though it was higher for Kansas, again, I think there were a lot of people still trying to figure out defensive rotations, especially for how young this Gonzaga team is.
Yep.
And for how new everyone kind of is gelling with each other versus Baylor. Baylor has quite a bit of sophomores, juniors, I think a handful of seniors at the most. But Baylor does have players that have played with each other. So even though the percentage favors Kansas, or favors Gonzaga in terms of more, as in terms of the higher percentage, I think Gonzaga gets is favorable in that.
I think Gonzaga absolutely it wins this comparison because the number that's not shown is possessions in the game. And this is where that pace of play comes in. Gonzaga absolutely played a faster pace of play.
Yeah, and it's 192 points scored in that game versus 160.
Yeah. So what I see there additionally is Kansas scored 53.2, but off of 10 assists, which means that a lot of that was iso ball, which means somebody on Gonzaga wasn't playing good man defense. That's fixable later in the season.
Yeah. But yeah, then the 18 assists Kansas got on Baylor that game as well. Again, we have to micromanage these stats, and I think going forward, although Baylor has to play 3 teams, I think they have to play Auburn again, they have to play Texas and Texas Tech before they get to this team back to back.
Yeah.
But this is another team that we're going to see the favorability. And this was really the one game I thought for sure Gonzaga could have had a loss this season, looking back on it.
It was the game Gonzaga probably... So I know before this game you were really worried about Gonzaga losing. And I was just sitting on my chair just going 5-0, 5-0, 5-0. Because Bobo Huggins just likes to take the L when he's facing the Zags. But in terms of press Virginia against a team that hasn't played together at the beginning of the season, coming out of a COVID break, like
Yeah.
that had recipe all over it for, oh God, no, what happened?
Yeah.
And then Suggs getting injured in the first half.
That's
So like
something too.
before the game, there was reason to be nervous. Then during the game, it was a, oh snap. And now post game, looking back on it, all the factors were there to make it Gonzaga's toughest game, and yet they still came out with a 5-point win.
Right, yeah. The final score 87-82. Again, a little bit later in the season, so everyone kind of already had that offensive, defensive rotations figured out. Gonzaga's still scoring 49.3%, 4 guys with 10 plus points. 3-point percentage. This was not the best game for Gonzaga on the 3-point line, but again, it's the zone defense from West Virginia. 4 for 16. Assists though, 22 assists from Gonzaga on the game. Offensive rebounds 10 still despite the zone.
Yeah.
11 turnovers from Gonzaga. Field goal percentage on defense, so West Virginia scoring 37.9% from the field, 5 for 17 from the 3-point line. West Virginia still got 16 assists, but they turned the ball over 15 times and 14 offensive rebounds. Granted, Suggs was hurt for some of this too, but even though Suggs finished off the game, still came back in the second half. Still very impressive stats. Again, this was the one game that I feel like looking back on was the biggest scare.
Now here's the thing about West Virginia and why Baylor has a very good chance of beating them.
Mm-hmm.
West Virginia outsized Gonzaga in the paint. West Virginia has 2 very large post players.
Yes. Every year they have 2 very large post players. This year's no different, but somehow it is.
And so that was their advantage with those offensive rebounds you're talking about.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: is speed beats size, and so Gonzaga's guards are great at cutting to the basket, and thus
especially a lot of the back door.
A lot of the back doors. Like my favorite tweet, and you can find it every game, is Free Ira Brown going, oh look, Aya's gonna score on a cut to the basket.
Yeah.
And so there's always going to be that connection. And so when guards cut and bigs slide over, they give up a lot of fouls. Once West Virginia's bigs got into foul trouble, that game was over for them.
Yeah, and that's what it came down to. I think.
And that's why you see the assist number so high. That's why you see the 3-point shooting so low. It's because Gonzaga didn't really need to shoot the 3.
Mm-hmm.
They just needed to get the West Virginia bigs in foul trouble, and then it was easy pickings.
Mm-hmm.
You know who has 3 really good guards that are great at cutting to the basket? Baylor.
Right.
It's almost like they can watch the tape of the Gonzaga game and say,
just copy this play, copy that play, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, essentially. Yeah, and it's going forward. Again, I mean, we kind of talked about this a week or 2 ago with who we think are going to stay undefeated for the rest of the season. I do want to give a shout out to Fortune because he had one of the funniest tweets that I saw.
Oh my God, Moose Throat!
Fortune, he had one of the funniest tweets with the remaining 3, the remaining 3 undefeated teams between Gonzaga, Baylor, and Drake.
Look, Drake,
I will post the photo of this when we're talking about it, but it's absolutely brilliant.
Drake, we love you. You are undefeated, but you're not Gonzaga and Baylor.
It's so funny. It made me laugh so hard. But again, going forward with the season, I think Gonzaga should be undefeated by the end of the season going into March. Baylor, because of what's coming up, I will be very surprised if you stay undefeated. Not because you are a bad team, but it's because you have to go through a gauntlet. Like that's what I see. You have to go through Texas, then you go Auburn, then Texas Tech, West Virginia, then I think a game or 2, then Kansas. It's a ridiculous schedule you guys have coming up. If you go undefeated through all that, I mean, good Lord, congrats to you. It's absolutely insane for what's coming up with their schedule.
Yeah, there's a game where they have to play Texas at Texas
And
on the
that's-
2nd.
And that's the one game, or that was the game that I thought they were going to get their first loss. Not
Yeah.
because they're worse than Texas. I think it's just because you guys just play so many good teams back to back to back to back to back to back.
Yeah. As I was saying, I am worried about West Virginia because West Virginia is good and they play really tough defense. However, Baylor's has a favorable matchup. They're built for it. Texas. If Baylor gets through Texas, I'm willing to bet they make it to NCAA undefeated.
As well, that would be very impressive. I would love to see 2 undefeated teams that should have already matched up against each other.
3 undefeated
Well,
teams.
yeah, if we include Drake, but I'm just saying with the number 1 seeds, but having 2 undefeated teams that should have matched up with each other earlier on the season and then make it to the championship, which is what it's starting to look like. Again,
7-game
micromanage these stats. Tell me who you think should be number 1 overall. I mean, sure, I will agree with you no matter what you say.
agree UNC should be number 1?
I mean, pick and choose. Who
Wow, you heard it here first. Not so mid-majors believe North Carolina should be number 1. Wow.
I mean, pick and choose whoever you want between Gonzaga and Baylor. Give me your reasoning why, and I will always say I agree with you because, yeah, they should be number 1. But you have another team that should also be number 1. So leave a comment down below. Who do you think should be number 1? Give me your reasoning why. Again, subscribe to the channel. We will be doing a giveaway once we hit 50 subscribers. Please like this video. Please follow us on Twitter. I think Rick is funnier than me on Twitter, so you should go definitely follow him more than me. But until next time, please stay safe and please stay healthy. We will see you in the next video next week.
Yes, what he said.